What New Orleans should know about native plants. I'm a big advocate for using native plants in the landscape, a growing trend in gardening across the state and the nation. Having said that, we throw the term native plant around quite a lot, but may not always think about what we mean when we use it. When you say native plant, do you mean native to the southeastern United States, native to Louisiana, or native to the specific place where you live and garden? I'm generally satisfied if the plant is native to the southeast or the Gulf coastal region from Texas to Florida. I especially favor plants that are native to Louisiana, but I think most of us would feel entirely too limited if we only use plants that were native to our local areas. Why should we use natives in our landscapes? The best reason is to give our landscapes a sense of place. Using plants native to your region links your landscape to surrounding natural areas, and native plants can play an important role in providing food for native wildlife and habitat restoration. Finally, there is simply a sense of satisfaction that many of us get from using native plants. Native plants are also well adapted to the climate of their region and are generally tolerant of, though not immune to, common pest problems. I think this idea, however, is sometimes presented too forcefully. I often hear it said that natives are lower maintenance, don't get insect and disease problems, and are tougher and more reliable than non-natives. This is not totally true. Natives are not necessarily easier to grow or more reliable than introduced plants. A plant will not thrive in your landscape just because it's a native. As with all plants, to grow them successfully, you must match the growing conditions a native plant needs to the growing conditions where you plant it. As for pest problems, native plants have their share. Although native plants may survive pest attacks and recover without treatment, a gardener might not take great solace in that when looking at a plant whose leaves are unattractively chewed or spotted. On the other hand, non-natives can be remarkably free from insect and disease problems. One of the issues with invasive introduced plants is that there are no natural controls, animals, insects or diseases, to attack and limit their growth. So I have to disagree with the idea that all natives are less bothered by insects or diseases than all non-native plants. For me, using natives in the landscape comes down to the three A's: appearance, adaptability and availability. Appearance. A native plant must generally be attractive in some way to make us want to grow it in our landscapes. There are lots of nondescript natives out there that few, if any, gardeners would want. Adaptability. Our landscapes often offer harsh environments for plants. Natives that have been most successfully incorporated into landscapes are not overly fussy about growing conditions and are able to adapt to a variety of situations. Availability. It doesn't matter how good a native plant is, if it is not being propagated and grown by wholesale nurseries, and if retail nurseries don't carry it. So, successful natives need to be relatively easy to propagate commercially and amenable to being produced in containers. And to get retail nurseries to carry them, customers need to be sure and ask for them. As you think about adding trees, shrubs, ground covers and vines to your landscape this spring, always look to see if there are some suitable native options. And when a non-native and a native plant are equally suitable, go native. Tips for gardeners: weeds away. It is very important to pull up and dispose of cool season annual weeds such as henweed, bedstraw and chickweed now. These weeds are currently setting thousands of seeds that will plague you next winter if they are not removed. Bulb basics. If you have spring flowering bulbs that will bloom again next year, let them finish blooming, then allow the foliage to begin to yellow before you cut it off. Bulbs that rebloom well include leucojum, many narcissuses and some daffodils, Dutch iris, amaryllis, latilla, Easter lily, wood hyacinth, freesia and calla lily. Many other bulbs, such as tulips, hyacinths, will rebloom but the spikes are much smaller. Crocus, anemones, scilla and muscary will rarely repeat bloom or will produce inferior flowers next year. You can pull them up and discard them when they finish blooming. A new native garden. I remember spending a lot of time working with volunteers at the New Orleans Botanical Garden back in the 1980s and 1990s, and there was a small area off the beaten path where a selection of native plants had been put in. I always enjoyed visiting that garden. Unfortunately, it was destroyed by the flood that followed Hurricane Katrina, and I have missed it ever since. After Katrina, the National Garden Clubs established a fund called Green the Gulf Coast to help member garden clubs repair and replant damaged public gardens. Area garden clubs that belong to the Federated Council of New Orleans Garden Clubs applied for grants to replant the native plant garden at the Botanical Garden from that fund. Grants were received by 15 area clubs and were pooled for the project. In addition, the Garden Club of New Jersey heard about the destruction and sent their federation's natural disaster fund to replant native trees. As a result, the native plant garden is being replanted. The soil in the new garden has been replaced, the drainage restored and a new sprinkler system installed. The newly renovated garden will be dedicated on Monday at 4 p.m. as part of a garden tour held on the opening day of the Louisiana Garden Club Federation's 75th anniversary convention in New Orleans. If you are at the Spring Garden Show at the Botanical Garden this weekend, you might swing by the garden, on the north end of the pavilion, for an early sneak peek.